Hi YouTube, I'm Barrett Laurie, and thank you for joining me for this new video here on the BookTube playlist on my channel. Today we are going to be reviewing the wonderful YA contemporary fantasy The Fascinators, written by Andrew Eliopulos. But before we get into that, I wanted to take care of some channel maintenance. If you're new here, I hope you'll consider subscribing and dinging the bell below. The bell will give you notifications every time I upload new content to the channel, which is 2 to 3 times per week. What do we cover here on the channel? Lots of stuff. I'm a new writer, so there's an entire playlist called the AuthorTube playlist. Those videos consist of my writing tips and tricks, my experiences hiring an editor, querying my first debut novel, and hopefully getting it traditionally published. I'm gonna share every step of the way with you all, so if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, click that subscribe button. I am a major book nerd, so every time I read a hot new book like this one, I intend to do book reviews in the BookTube playlist. If you're suffering from chronic illness, for me specifically it's Crohn's disease, you might enjoy my Let's Talk About Butt Stuff playlist, which goes into detail about my experiences with battling the healthcare system, trying to overcome chronic illness, which is something that you never really overcome, you just learn to deal with, and my experience with Crohn's disease. We all need to laugh, it's the best medicine. For me, those videos fall in the Dear Barrett playlist, where I give a gay Dear Abby style advice, I call it practical advice for people with a sense of humor, to some brave questioners out there on Twitter and Instagram. Also, if you're not already giving me a follow on the socials, head over to Twitter and Instagram. Consider giving me a follow at Barrett_Laurie. I am very good about communicating with anyone out there in the social sphere. So, I think that's about it. Let's get started. I am a book nerd, self-professed, love to read. I find great storytelling to be the best way to pass my time, whether I'm the one telling the story or whether I'm enjoying it. So I am starting this playlist, the BookTube playlist, for just the purpose of reviewing the books that I read and love or don't love, and will share with you what I thought about the books. Important note, I will do a few reviews of books written by fellow AuthorTubers. I will probably put those reviews in the AuthorTube playlist. However, I intend to do book reviews for both. So this week we are talking about The Fascinators, which is a traditionally published book by Andrew Eliopulos, and it was released by Harper Teen under the Harper Collins banner. I absolutely loved this book. I am a big fan of YA fantasy. Obviously, that's the genre I write in, that's the genre I prefer to read. But I am constantly on the hunt for LGBTQ stories that are written by an own voices author, because I just find them to be incredibly authentic and very easy for me to fall in love with. I just usually can tell if the author is themselves gay. I don't know why. Maybe that's my superpower. Who knows? I'll have to look into that. This book came out in May of this year. It jumped out at me right away because of the blurb, which sucked me in pretty instantly, as well as the absolutely gorgeous cover art. But it is absolutely beautiful. I loved the animation, I loved just looking into the clouds, the little ball of magic, the energy sphere that's being held in his hand. It just really sucked me in. Plus, I absolutely loved the tagline, which is, maybe we're all under somebody else's spell. It's like, you had me at the cover. I did not buy it right when it came out. I was a little late to the game because I've been having some health issues this year. If you don't know about that, check out my videos over here on the Let's Talk About Butt Stuff playlist. But due to a flare with Crohn's disease and a diagnosis that came in March, I was late to the Fascinators game. However, I want to review it now for you. The inside of the book is equally as beautiful. I love that each chapter has the little energy ball that kind of denotes each chapter. I'm gonna say that this was a very, very readable book. I devoured all 310 or so pages in 2 days. So if I blaze through a book in 2 to 4 days, somewhere in that time frame, you had me as an author, you sucked me in, you got me, And that is exactly what happened with The Fascinators. I loved it from the moment I picked it up. I enjoyed it and found it very readable. I think that Andrew is wonderful at his narrative. I think that his voice is clear, and it helped me as a reader to follow along with his clear and guiding voice throughout the story. What I loved about The Fascinators was the world. So in the world of The Fascinators, magic is not only real, but it's kind of widely accepted. In fact, it's taught in schools, or rather, there are clubs that people can join as if magic is an extracurricular activity. However, it is as if magic is not something that's in the shadows or not something that's hidden. It's widely known, people know that it exists, and he does a great job of also weaving in kind of some Christian folks don't agree with studying magic, practicing magic, what have you, which at least for me as a gay reader, that spoke to me because I can tell you that I have experienced discrimination many, many, many times by those in the Christian community. And so a story that talks about magic that doesn't hit on sometimes Christianity, especially with a gay protagonist, that doesn't hit on the fact that Christians can often be rather hateful about LGBTQ issues, would probably also be hateful about magic, thinking it's the devil's work. That's a big missed opportunity, because I think that helped suck me into the story right away to kind of go, oh yeah, that's totally believable. So there are some characters that have some very clear abilities, but one of my cons for this book was actually the magic system. So while I loved the story, it sucked me in, it was wonderful, the magic system wasn't 100% clear to me in a couple of different ways. Number one, I didn't quite understand ever the limits of it, which for me is always a bit of a distraction, because if I don't understand that there's a limit, then that means that there probably isn't one, and in that case, then anything is possible, and basically all bets are off. I had a little hard time wrapping my head around there not being a clear limit to the magic system. Also, with the magic system, I noticed that some people had powers. For instance, Sam's mom is an empath. There is another character named Denver who I absolutely love. He was wonderful. But he's kind of a supporting character. Denver has luck magic. The downside to both the empath mention and the luck magic mention was that neither were explained in depth very much. It was kind of just left there as, oh, by the way, I have luck magic, and then we kind of never heard about it again, other than like jokes when they were kind of flirting throughout the book. As far as his mom being an empath, it's talked about throughout the entire book, but there isn't really ever a clear explanation for whether that is a gift, if that's something that she studied herself, is there a limit to it, can she turn it off and on? I don't know. It was, to me, that was the only thing in the magic system besides the limits. Those were the two things that were distracting to me. Those would be my negatives for the book. Go to a local bookstore and pick up this book, and I'm not going to give away what happens, so I'm going to do my best to talk about it without giving away too much of the plot. Let's talk about the characters. So the main characters of this book are Sam, who is our protagonist. He is a young gay man growing up in a small town in Georgia. Sam is a likable character. There are moments where he does some things that you think, ooh, cringe, but overall, he's a likable character and you're going to enjoy him. James and Delia both have some things about their character that make them hard to love, and yet they are his best friends, and we are supposed to really fall in love with them. I found that sometimes very difficult, so do with that what you will. In this world, the magic club that Sam belongs to with his two best friends, Delia and James, is called the Fascinators. And they have named their club the Fascinators because I believe it's James has run across that name when reading about magic, and he decided to coin the phrase for the name of their team. It also becomes kind of an inside joke. So in the book, the magic clubs around the country all compete at statewide conventions for basically medals. So it's as if magic is not only widely known and used, but it's also something that's a bit of an extracurricular. For these kids, it's kind of their whole world. It's what ties them together. It's what keeps them as a unit. And for the story's purposes, the Magic Club drives the plot through most of the story. The club, the Fascinators, is a pretty important part of the story. So the characters, they are lovable. Some of them are a little bit hard to understand as far as what their motivations might be. I will say that Sam comes across as the glue that holds the group together. Clearly, that and Magic Club, the Fascinators. I found that James is Sam's best friend, he and Delia's best friend, and Sam is hopelessly in love with James. It's unclear throughout the book if James is actually bisexual or if he's gay or if he's just experimented with being gay. I'm not quite sure. However, as a gay man who was a few moons ago a gay teen, I can tell you that anybody that is queer has experienced that person who has danced the line between friend and something more. And this book has that in spades with the relationship between Sam and James. For me, the outcome of that was very satisfying. For other people, it will not be. Denver is the fourth. Their Magic Club consists of just those three until a new boy, Denver, moves to town from Nashville, Tennessee. And he was quite skilled in luck magic, talked about it earlier, and wants to join the club. From almost the moment he is introduced, I was absolutely sure that he was going to be a wonderful love interest for Sam and a good distraction from the unhealthy relationship he has with James. And it turned out that I was right on that one. I won't tell you how that ends because, again, I want you to read the book. But for Denver, I found that character to be refreshing. He kept me from wanting to pull my hair out with Delia, who is a kind of likable character, who is a likable character in the beginning, who turns into someone at the end that I don't recognize. However, I think that's very true of relationships in general, especially for teens. Who we are friends with in high school changes so much by the time we become adults. Even a few years after high school, when we're in college, those relationships change a lot. So what was great about this book was it kind of would prepare a young reader for the people that are our whole world in high school are going to change a lot. And sometimes they disappoint us. I loved how supportive Sam's parents are in the book of his being gay, of his loving magic, his wanting to learn magic. That was something that really also endeared his family, his parents, especially his mom, to me throughout the story. The pacing of the book was good. I did feel that it started slow, and then by the time it took off, it was like it took off like a rocket. My biggest downside of the book would be so much happened in the last 6 chapters, which really only consisted of about 60 pages or so. I was kind of at the end hoping we were beginning a series. I was hoping this was book 1 of a duology, maybe, because I just felt there was so much at the end that was left unanswered about several characters that, yes, obviously I can dream up my own ending for each of these characters and imagine where they went. And maybe that was Mr. Eliopulos' idea when he wrote the book, was that he wanted us to kind of dream for ourselves what would be next for them. But with the exception of 2 characters, I didn't feel like I got closure on what was happening with those characters, what happened in the story, and specifically there is a huge event about 4 chapters before the end, 5 chapters before the end, that happens at the Magic Convention that I did not see coming, so I do love that. I love a good twist. But also, I would have devoted more time to, like, as a writer, I would have devoted more time to that. The writing was beautiful. He is a very skilled writer. It's clear that he's an editor. it's well written, there is no fluff, and he does a great job of telling the story. My only complaint would have been the ending felt very rushed. By the time we'd gotten to that point, I felt like we tied up some major stuff in like 40 pages, which, for me isn't my ideal favorite way to end up a story. I really like a slow burn on closure, but again, that's a stylistic choice, and I don't know that it was a bad one. It didn't distract me from this being a great book. I'm gonna give this one about a 4.3 stars, and the only points I would have taken off would be for the pacing, which again, I felt like was super slow and then was like warp speed at the end and didn't quite tie up all of the loose ends. I'm okay with that kind of pacing if there is another book coming or another story after that one that you're setting me up for, but I believe this is a standalone. So if that is the case, then again, I would dock a couple of points for that because there's a lot that happens in the last 5 chapters that I really would have dug into more if I were writing this myself. I would have taken off a couple of points also for a few missed opportunities with the relationship between James and Sam. They're ambiguous, will they, won't they? I understand why he did it. I loved the way he did it. I thought it was very clean at the end, how he explained what those were. He teases throughout the entire book until almost the very end what, in fact, the last like 3 chapters, I think, before we find out exactly what has occurred between them that's left Sam feeling like there maybe is something more going on than just friendship. What I would say about that was it didn't, for me, have to be there. I would have been okay with the question of whether there was more to this relationship than meets the eye without necessarily having it teased out the way that it was. I felt that it built up a lot of expectation that didn't quite get satisfied in the way that he wrapped it up. In saying that, the way he wrapped it up was great. I just wish he'd have done it more middle of the book instead of like the very end. I would highly recommend this, even though I gave it the 4.3. The points I docked were just, honestly, I really wanted more. I wanted another book. So if there is a second book to this, I'm going to jack this rating up to like a 4.8, because maybe a 4.7. But I'm going to give it a few more points because I really, really liked it. I just wanted more. So that's always a sign of a good book to me. Also, one I cannot put down. So if you want a book that you will blaze through really quickly, that is easy to read, enjoyable, has LGBTQ characters, touches on lots of themes that are relevant to teens today, and makes magic something that is widely accepted for those in the world of the book, consider The Fascinators by Andrew Eliopulos. He is a very talented author, and I cannot wait to see what else he has in store for us. So thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this first BookTube book review. I am Barrett Laurie. If you haven't already subscribed, click that subscribe button and ding the bell. The bell will give you notifications every time we upload new content to the channel. If you're not already following me on the socials, head over to Instagram and Twitter. You'll find me at Barrett_Laurie at both. I am really good about engaging with anyone on the socials. So subscribe, find me over there on the social media. So subscribe, find me out in social land, and be sure to reach out and say hello because I love chatting with any of you from YouTube. So have a wonderful day.